Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good moment of the day, wherever you are, either if you're watching it now or then when it is recorded. My name is Rocio Nogales Muriel, and today I'm here with you with a double hat. I'm both here with a research network on social enterprise and the social and solidarity economy called MS, and also as board member of Culture Action Europe. It's actually a great pleasure to be here today launching this community of practice that we have prepared in the framework of a Horizon project that is called MC. I'm going to be sharing a screen because there's something that we wanted to share with you. And the one thing that I wanted to do first, before everything, was actually before anything else, was thanking really all of you for being here, but also our speakers, particularly Jorge, Luis, Solweig, and Jordi, that they took the time that we have been preparing, for a while. What are we going to be talking about? Trying to digest. There's so many ways that we could go around about this issue that is bringing us today here. And what we're trying to contextualize for you is why are we launching this community of practice today? When in August 2021, the IPCC report was launched, it was the sixth one. This artist, visual artist from the UK, Alisa Singer, she reacted to the overwhelm of data and facts and schemes and graphs. She translated all of that into the emotions that then came up as a visual set of graffiti. I was just telling my colleagues that this is one of them, but actually I encourage you all to get into the website of the IPCC, where actually they published her series, because it's really a stunning one. And I think that when we think about how can we go about when we are active in the arts and culture sector, to face and to not be paralyzed, to overcome paralyzation and paralysis in front of the climate emergency. We know, we sense, we intuitively feel that there's a very special role and place for the organizations and agents of the culture and creative sector. This is precisely the hypothesis that we departed with for Encino. This is the project that Maya was referring to. It's called Empowering Creative Cultural Industries to Boost Systemic Innovation for Sustainable Climate Transitions. And as I was saying, our hypothesis, the point of departure that we have is that there's a set of these organizations that we call cultural and artistic social enterprises that are better suited to inspire, to lead, to be used even as an example and inspire the other organizations within the sector, because they identify these emerging social demands and the environmental priorities, and this is because they're really embedded in their communities and territories. They propose innovative and creative solutions to meet these challenges. They also are a huge actor and contributor to the change in the modification of socially shared imaginaries, and they inspire blueprints within the CCIs and beyond it. There's, I don't want to get too much into detail. There's, if you're interested, you have the QR there, the website, it's mcino.eu, so you can check it, and you're actually more than welcome to do so. But just very quickly, just to remember that for us, the idea is that we really want to embed sustainable climate transitions in the cultural and creative sector in arts, with arts and through arts. And precisely, we're doing this working with 5, we call them transformation sites. These are these organizations, these CASE, cultural and artistic social enterprises, and we have one of them with us here today, that are going, with whom we're going to co-design sort of attempts or programs, prototypes, we call them, that we're going to be testing and learning from all the experiences. But we know that, it would be useless if all this knowledge, all this imagination, all of this creativity remains in this circle. And that's precisely why we are here today. It's really to launch this community of practice that enlarges, and that's really the goal of this community of practice, to enlarge the group of people who are building together, imagining together, sharing together. And when I say sharing, we talk about solutions, we talk about strategies, we talk about tools as a way to overcome, the many challenges that are so locally embedded as well, and that usually it's the local community who has the key to overcoming them. So I will leave it there. I think that, as I said, the goal for today is to hear from four of these agents that are active, in different fields of culture and the arts, to hear what is it that they're doing, how are they feeling, how are they going about it, and also to exchange with you right after. And really, we really count on you to share with us, your experiences with community of practice, whether you have some ideas, some knowledge, some advice that you can share with us so we can start together, and also to obviously formally invite all of you to join our community of practice. So, actually one thing that we were thinking about, if you could in the chat, if you could quickly just write, where you come from and one emoji that, just you feel like sharing with us, that would be very helpful, because that way we can just, find out where you're writing from. Thank you so much. I wanted to also thank Karen and Maya. Those are my two colleagues from Culture Action Europe, who are going to be also, helping us go through today's program. Karen will go first, facilitating and moderating the discussion with our four guests, and then Maya would be our harvester. She would really be, helping us learn from each other and summarize, what we learn to move forward in the framework of the community of practice. So without further ado, I would just pass on the floor to Karen. Thank you all, and looking forward to meeting you in the community of practice.
Hello. Thank you so much, Rocio, for passing on the word and this wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. Again, on my side as well, welcome to today's session. Thanks for joining us. I really hope that this will provide some food for thought for the discussions to come as we kick off this community of practice. So we have invited some inspiring guests today, as Lucio mentioned, who have generously accepted our invitation and to share their perspectives and their experiences with us. But before I introduce them to you, or rather that they introduce themselves, I want to say also a few words on my end from the Culture Action Europe perspective, why within this community of practice we've decided to create this share space and invite these colleagues to reflect together with us. So I know that it's always a challenging question, this why, because I think there are way many reasons to have this discussion at this moment. But if I may try, I think maybe some of you may know that Culture Action Europe is part of two initiatives to support the climate transition in the cultural sector in different but complementary ways, as Lucio mentioned. So one is the Emicino project, in which we're a partner, which we'll talk about more in the second part of the program today. But another one is the Shift Eco Certification and Peer Learning project, where I participate as a Green Team member on Kai's behalf. And basically, this is a program which we've developed together with other cultural networks, and it's in leadership of Culture for Climate Scotland. Also, that is a program that provides organizations such as ours with practical tools and guidance, as the name suggests, to make the shift, basically, or well, also to track and monitor and minimize our footprint, to implement environmentally sustainable practices across our work, reflect on the work that we do and what impact it has. So I think that this process in this year especially for us has become kind of a catalyst for a deeper reflection. And we really asked ourselves, does making this shift stop at monitoring or at reporting, or is there some broader cultural transformation needed within the sector? Um, and as an organization, we felt that it was important to explore how this transformation can look like or does already look like, and how it can contribute to the climate transition. So we began exploring work that is happening across the sector, and indeed there is a vast amount of initiatives, researches, debates that are shaping the conversation, regenerative approaches, culture goal 30, push to recognize the culture as a fundamental pillar. There is the grassroots organization perspective, tools, hyper local response, but like there is very many things to discuss about. And at some point I was personally like, okay, I'm out of my element. This topic is clearly very, very complex and interconnected, and there's a lot to learn, but also how much knowledge that there is already across our networks, and the incredible partners we have among us, and across Europe and beyond also, who can help us make sense of what is happening. Because it's sometimes in as Rocio was mentioning, or Maya was mentioning, alone in our corners, it's different to see it, but there is a lot that is happening. And through these experiences, maybe these partners and experts can help us create these spaces where the exchange and learning can happen, and which basically we understand that is at least as a network organization, is the fundamental step in which we can support this transition of the sector. So that was the reflection also, to include this additional conversation on top of the community practice. And with this in mind, we have invited our guest today, which I'm very delighted to have you, Jorge Gallardo with BeTime CSA, Lewis Coenen-Rowe from Culture from Climate Scotland, Solweig Barbier with ARVIVA, and Jordi Pascual with the UCLG Culture Committee. And I will invite them one by one to introduce themselves and their organizations, and share with us also perhaps their perspective of what sustainability means for the cultural sector, and also what the cultural sector can do for sustainability or the climate transition. Maybe I can ask Jordi to begin by introducing himself. Please, hello.
Hello, Kerem. Yes, this is Jordi Pascual, based in Barcelona, representing the World Organization of United Cities and Local Governments, and member of the, as you just mentioned, Kerem, the Culture 2030 Goal campaign, advocating for a culture goal in the SDGs in an explicit way since October 2013. And now this topic growing in the agenda of many organizations.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much, Jordi. Indeed, I think that this perspective is especially relevant with all that has been going on. Also, the missing SDG report by UNESCO that has been heavily talking about this. Now that we have so there is a conversation going on, and we really want to hear more from you about what is it. But before we go on in the details, I also want to invite our other guests. So maybe I can ask Solveig to introduce herself as well.
Yes, hello everyone, thank you. So I'm Solweig Barbier. I work for a non-profit organization that is called ARVIVA, which is a French organization that we created 6 years ago, and that is a network for people, artists, cultural workers that want to talk about and work on sustainability of the performing arts sector in France. Well, that will be all for the moment, and I will be able to explain maybe what we do really afterwards.
Thank you, Solveig. And Jorge?
Hello, I'm Jorge Gallardo from BeTime. We are a really, really small cooperative of 5 members working in South Spain, in Cádiz, on regeneration mostly, but I will explain later.
Thank you very much. And Lewis, please also introduce yourself.
Hello, yeah, I'm Lewis from Culture for Climate Scotland. So we are a charity founded in 2011, and we exist to try and help the arts and culture sector in Scotland play the fullest possible role in work on tackling climate change, which includes a big range of different things that I can maybe come on to in a little bit.
Thank you. So as our participants, you can see we have here some colleagues with us that indeed, as Rocio was mentioning, represent very different daily life, quotidian approach to how we can respond to what is going on in the sector. And maybe we have prepared some questions for them to expand on their work, which I think is we never have enough time to discuss, but we can maybe start. I wanted to ask Jordi to go on with expanding a bit more on the idea of what this broader cultural policy world look like. What is there to do? So I feel that in the research that I've made, there seems to be in quite a debate. So there's a fine line between positioning culture as a fundamental pillar of sustainability and, on the other hand, instrumentalizing it as a vector for change and for greenwashing. So what do you think from your perspective as indeed an advocate for the cultural goal 2030? How do you think as the cultural sector we can stay clear of this instrumentalizing risk and stay true to ourselves and while also asserting our value as a sector, as a foundational public good and also a core pillar of sustainability? Can you please share your perspective with us and maybe more?
I will try to be brief, Kerem. Let me be explicit. The culture goal will not stop the instrumentalization of culture, because this is something that power has done since the beginning of humanity. Let me put it this way. Modern contemporary cultural policies have been at the basis of consolidation of political power and economic power. And frankly, the culture goal will not stop that. The culture goal is a proposal to make the conversations on the cultural capabilities of human being stronger and wider. The culture goal, my position, no, I'm speaking not this is myself speaking. Every member of the campaign has its own explanation. My take is when we are absent in the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals, it is for sure that anything related to cultural actors and the cultural dimension of development, heritage, creativity, diversity, critical knowledge, for sure, it will be instrumentalized by other programs, by other actors. With the culture goal, we want a place in which the cultural actors unfolding what they know what to bring to society, which is developing the values, the processes, the topics that nobody but them, nobody but us treasure to guarantee that they are at the heart of sustainable development in cities, nations, globally. This is the idea. And the proposal that with Cultural Action Europe and the Federation of Libraries and all the networks of the Culture 2030 Goal campaign is a proposal that goes in that direction to put some walls to the current marginal place of culture in the global conversation on development. Then you mentioned a more complex debate, which is culture as a pillar of sustainable development. I could not go in that direction. If you really ask, okay, I will develop that later. But I think that for the first set, that's more than okay. But correct me, please. Yes, thank you.
I mean, I would be very much interested to hear you actually grow on, elaborate on that topic, because I find that there are different opinions. I just wanted to ask, before I ask my next question to another colleague, I wanted to also ask you, so, reading one of the reports, I came across this point as stressed multiple times, that there is some lack of evidence-based info that we need to bring to the conversation so that we can secure further financing in direction to culture as a climate enabler. So I wonder, like, in your opinion, how can we incentivize or engage cultural organizations that maybe are not actively part of this conversation to indeed bring those perspectives? What do you need from the cultural sector to advocate through this campaign, thinking on this subject?
What the campaign needs from cultural actors?
Yeah, exactly. So what kind of what do you lack as an advocate for this subject? What do you think we as cultural sector we can reflect on in supporting this broader global debates? Do you have any tangible ideas?
Well, let me be bold. I would like a general strike on 21st May 2026 and 2027, so that the ambassadors in New York and no culture on that day. But this is not realistic. So I think that what we need is the capillarity of the proposals of the campaign. But this is the responsibility of the steering group, of the Agora members, to send the culture goal proposal of 10 targets and more than 50 indicators. Nobody can say the culture conversation on development is now unequipped. The culture goal proposal released in September 2025, it is not perfect. You can disagree whether it's too much cultural rights, too few cultural rights, forgetting cultural actors, too many cultural actors, but it is as clean, as feasible as the current other 17 SDGs, as clearly targeted, as clearly announced. Nobody can say the cultural conversation cannot take place. No, stop. It can take place. The difficulty lies in the political positions of ABC, and this is I believe where is the bottleneck. Where it is now is that one.
Thank you very much for. Sorry, did you have more to say? Okay. So yeah, thank you indeed. I think I just wanted more clarity on what you think on that development. But thinking of also like on the ABC or maybe more localized response, national response, or like perspectives on the ground, I also wanted to go towards Jorge now, because there is indeed this like broader global discussion, but I think also there is a perspective that when we talk about the climate transition, there is also a tendency to, really focus on the major systemic change. Yet I feel that the real transformation, it often starts locally, and knowledge and practice really emerges from lived experiences. So I wanted to ask you, Jorge, as a professional working on the grassroots level, working on the ground, how does this change take shape for you? What are some of the challenges that you see, or how can we connect your work to the conversation that Jordi previously was talking about. What is your perspective on that?
Thank you, Kerem. Nice and not nice to hear you, Jordi. So real that now what? So one thing about this connection, I was thinking coming and yesterday also because we are going to have an XR action tomorrow. Yeah, we maybe have different approach of culture, and now I will explain that. But I can say that there's days that you can feel hope closer, and there is another days that you can see that yeah, there is a bit that we can do. And when some people say talk about the window of opportunity, how big is it? Is for me, it's kind of yeah. It caused me fear because I'm afraid of that kind of situation. I live in a really small town in the garden of my grandfather, and there was a waterfall that is, there's no more water during the summer now for 5 years. It's not a very big river, it's a little stream, but we are facing the effects. And so the question is, how, when, and why we can call political inaction a crime against humanity. There is something there that in the horizon we are acting locally, but we see in our horizon how, for instance, in Valencia with the Dana, now we are closer to that point somehow. But we can work in memory, we can work with the seeds, we can work with water retention and regeneration of the landscape in parallel with regeneration of the imagination. So we can, yeah, foresee uh, futures, but with a great bat. So for me, the thing is, I feel a little bit away from the perspective that Jordi just mentioned, because we are a really, really small cooperative. We have 5 members. We have no families to support. We can live with 500 euros, okay? And this is need to be really very clear for me, okay? So that's why we can work on culture without events. We work in daily culture, closer to the production of food and closer to the economy and living systems. So we are working with more than human perspective because we love nature and because we have developed this intimacy with the ecosystem in our life themselves. So that's why we are here. We are here because we are small, and that's a value there also. But we are living with you in the same world. So
Thank you indeed, and I think it's a very important point to mention that even this perspective beyond human, as you were saying, which I really like, and the connection to the place is also culture, but sometimes with the traditional frameworks and ways of thinking that we have, it's not very easy to have that in mind when we're reflecting on these changes, and that can make indeed this connection between the global conversation more difficult, I guess. But
yeah.
did you find in your work ways that or like people or larger conversations that you can join into where you felt that the voice that you bring on the table was not heard? Actually, now I wonder, or was this did you have to claim the space in this sense as an organization?
We need to claim the word ecosystem, for instance, because it's really difficult now to explain that we work with the ecosystem, with local ecosystem. I'm not meaning enterprises. I mean trees and bees and seeds and water. So that's one thing. The other day we were having a conversation also in an open table, and somebody asked the difference between urban ecosystem and rural ecosystem, and I was, come on, diversity, diversity. I'm living with 9 cats, 2 dogs, 5 pomegranate trees, and 2 orange trees, and 1 avocado trees, and grass, and butterflies, and moscas and mosquitoes. So there's something that I don't feel alone in this kind of conversation because of one network that we have in Spain that is El Cubo Verde, Espacios de Arte y Cultura en el Campo. And there was one research project that we were doing about ecofeminism. And there was one case of an artist residency rule, guide, promote by a woman and her son that are alone in a town. So when you talk about impact, you are not going to think that if the donkey is healthier or healthy, that's an impact, because you are measuring only social impact. No, how many people and how you transform reality in the brain, so how to somehow change the way of feeling, something like that. So in that kind of perspective of how to work with the more than human world, for me, we need to open the discussion about the impact and the social impact and where culture operates, and it's not only between humans.
Thank you. And that goes, I think, from one of your initial points, which I just saw that Rocio also mentioned, because there is a very important need of regeneration of imagination of how we can include these conversations in those spaces indeed. But speaking of which, about creators and imaginators, I really want to thank you, Jorge. I also want to now invite Solweig to ask her a question, as she is very much working in the space where performance arts matches with climate transition, and really at that intersection, and in those spaces where we have our creators, our artists, but that are also very much affected by the shrinking cultural spaces, the working conditions, the need for travel. Are we traveling? Is it not sustainable? Where is the point where we decide that or not? So I wanted to ask you, on your perspective and in your specific performance arts or beyond area, what does the transition look like in your sector, and what does it mean for the artists and the performers? Can you reflect on that a bit for us, please?
Yes, of course, thank you. So I can't say for everyone at the same time, but I can speak I myself. So at some point I was working in the performing art as well, doing touring a lot. And at some point I was not really sure that this was sustainable. So I was touring in China or in the US or in Mexico, and taking flight ticket for 50 people of an orchestra, for example. And at the moment, I wasn't really sure that this was really of change, even more when I was going on the tour and seeing that we were talking about audiences that would be completely changed by our concert. But in the end, was not really sure that this was happening. And so I was wondering, not to say that we shouldn't go, but maybe to ask what were the positive impacts of what we were doing. And most of the time, we don't really ask ourselves that, because we only reply to funding grants and to find money. And if somebody wants us to come to some place, then we say, well, this is an artistic perspective, a good artistic perspective. We feel like this is a good thing. It means that our art is recognized and everything. But we see that there is some kind of something that is not the contradiction between the two, and that we really more than ever need to ask ourselves all the time, is what am I doing the right thing? And that probably, as we are working a lot in the cultural sector, we lack time to reflect on why we do things, and we just focused on how could we do things more quickly or in a greener way. So as you ask what it looks like for the performing arts sector, we feel like there are these kind of green practices where we entered ARVIVA as an organization. A lot of people, we feel like we just want to reduce our impacts, carbon impacts. In fact, in general, it's what we talk about. We feel like it's obviously needed, but it's not the only goal we should have. We have developed, of course, as ARVIVA, a lot of tools, including calculators that are not only focused on carbon as well. We really want to take the impact on biodiversity, on resources. So these calculation are interesting, but are not the only thing that we can do, and not that we should do, in fact. And because first, we don't really know what the goal is. Even if we have the Paris Agreement, we know that it's not less 80% of carbon emissions for everyone. It's not what it says. So it's a common responsibility, but it's not something that everyone as a people and as an organization should do. So it's very complicated to know where do we stop. And so it doesn't really help us to know what we should do. And we see as well that doing the grid practices, the more common things that we can do without changing anything, is not about 80% of our emissions. So we really have to think deeper. And the other thing that we try to do is really to organize this kind of conversation. So we focused on France because this is what we know most. So we are really just starting to try to investigate what is happening at the Europe level. As I said, I'm not like an environmental specialist. At the beginning, we are all people in ARVIVA that are working or worked in the performing arts sector. So we are trying to understand what is happening at the same time as people, at the other persons. And we try to create conversation to think of what a more tolerant and just social organization and a more green organization would like. And not organization as one structure, but the organization of the system itself. What it would mean having success, if artistic success is not about touring very far away or performing in front of large audiences, and to try to redefine what it would mean, what could be sustainable in many, many ways. And I don't have the reply. We know that many things are already existing and that they need amplification, that they need support. And what Jorge said as well is very inspiring to me in that sense. But we probably need to talk in all the chain value about this, and not only artists or not only cultural workers. And we also need to talk about this with other sectors. I was very struck by the example of the water cutting during the summer. The cultural sector and performing arts are very vulnerable at the moment. So we already have in France some cases where festivals that have place in summer because of heat waves, for example, using water, whereas the agricultural sector can't use water for their. So there is like really conflict on the resource use. And also, as the cultural sector, we must ask ourselves is if it's more important to have a festival than having food for the territory. And it's a bit more complicated. I mean, we need to create the spaces to talk about this because I don't have the answer, but we don't talk about it and it's just only conflict and position. And if we don't organize that, I feel we are going very in the, change is already here. So we really need to organize it. And just a figure just to end this, and sorry, it was a bit disorganized, but that festival in France, again, France is quite, in all Europe and in other world, quite not the worst place to in terms of climate change at the moment. But the summer festival of 2024, the music National Center in France had a study showing that 50%, of half of the festival last year, had to change their programmation due to climatic events. So, I mean, it's already here. They have not all canceled something, but they all had to adapt to things already happening. So, if there is one reason why we should organize things, it's just that it's already here. So, how can we do it? And also taking into account social justice and problems that we have been having for a long time. And we see like ecology and environmental subject as an entrance more than an only subject that we should take without taking all the other things around.
Thank you so much for this reflection. Now, I really want to react to a lot of points, although we don't have much time. But one thing that really stuck to me, and it was like something that, within the sector, obviously, every day we think about this, like cultural workers' precarious conditions. But indeed, the very good question is like, when is it that a music festival will take place over feeding people? That's a very relevant point. And how do we bring that in the conversation? How can we stop creating those inequalities? It's a very challenging topic. And indeed, none of us, I think, or at least to my knowledge, have the answer yet. But I hope that through the various initiatives we are all working on, we will start to reflect on it more and more. Thank you so much, Solweig. I would ask you another question, but I need to be mindful of time. So I will move on to our dear colleague, Louis, for which I've prepared, I think, the most annoying question of all, because I'm not going to lie, because the shift, as I've told initially, the Culture for Climate Scotland, they're our partners who are running and preparing the tools for us for the Shift project, and I spent quite a bit of time with that. So perhaps I had to take it out on someone. Sorry, Louis. I hope you didn't feel that way. No, but jokes aside, I really tried to reflect on it, and I thought maybe you might have a better point of view on this, or more expertise. So I wanted to ask you. So as also Solveig mentioned, there are many initiatives in the sector that really relies on calculating the footprint, and there are many tools and frameworks, but I mean, is it due to mimicry that we copy what else is others doing? Is it a conviction on their effectiveness? But also, I think that there is somehow a lack of like imagination in terms of like tackling our contribution to sustainability, beyond this reporting framework. So from your perspective, how can these tools go beyond compliance? I'm asking you again annoyingly, because you guys develop some of these tools as far as, so how do you think it can go beyond compliance and drive this systematic change? How can we complement them to support this change as organizations in the cultural sector, but also on a community level? Can you please reflect on that for us?
Yes, of course. And I don't think it's an annoying question. I think it's a really useful and relevant question that I'm very interested in. This topic of, this is basically a question about how do we know if we're making a difference? And I think that's the way it should always be framed, that any of this stuff which is about measurement or evaluation, it's primarily for our own learning, for our own understanding, so that we can see what we're doing and then do it better. And of course, there are things about how we report to funders and other people, and that's a secondary use of that learning and that measurement. But the first use should always be for ourselves and our own understanding. And I think that's a really important way of framing it. And I'm very aware that there is a risk with work on climate change that we tend to see things in too limited a way. So I often talk about like, there's this expectation that people want to see a graph and they want to see the line going down, basically. So they want to see, here's the carbon emissions last year, here's the carbon emissions this year, is the line going down? If the line's going down, we're winning. And if the line isn't going down, we're losing. And obviously it is important for the line to go down. We do need to reduce emissions. But thinking about the cultural sector, we're operating in this much broader context. Our emissions are small compared to other sectors. And I think if we only look at the emissions from our own operations, so running our buildings, our travel and this kind of thing, we're kind of missing the point of what the cultural sector is actually good at and what we're for and what we do. So increasingly, we run the reporting system for cultural organisations in Scotland to report on their own environmental impact to funders. And we're trying to approach that in a much more holistic way now. So they do have to report on emissions from gas and electricity and things like that. But we also ask them to talk about how their adapting to climate change impact. So thinking about how, weather patterns are changing, extreme weather events, flooding, all these things that can affect buildings and festivals, outdoor events, and how they're preparing for that. We also get them to talk about how they're using their influence. And I think this is really the most important thing. So the reason why it makes sense to really focus on climate change for the cultural sector is because of our influence, that we have trusted audiences, relationships. We produce creative work that changes how we understand the world. And we can't really miss that part of the picture. You can't put numbers on it, but we do get people to kind of talk about what they are doing and to give examples and share case studies and stories of those things, which I think are just as, if not more important than the numbers about how they're reducing their own environmental impact. And then I think maybe the final thing is, I suppose, just kind of understanding that action on climate change for cultural organizations isn't just about reducing emissions. It's also about thinking about that broader process of planning for how we respond to climate change and how we can support and improve that. So there are people, many of them are in the cultural sector, who have wealth and privilege and who can and should be reducing their own emissions. But there are also many people in this world who have a small carbon footprint, not by choice, but by necessity, because of poverty, because of disadvantage. And I'm very concerned about how we make sure that those people are involved in the process of planning climate change policy and the decisions, and how actually arts and cultural methods can be a really effective way of bringing people into that process, making it accessible, providing different ways to participate. And I run a lot of projects which are specifically about that. How can we use socially engaged arts methods to involve people in climate change planning and decision making? And the interesting thing about those projects is you can't report and say it led to any drop in emissions whatsoever, because that's not what it's about. It's about how you involve people in the process. And I think that's really important, because if we don't involve people in the process will be unfair, it will deepen inequalities, it will also increase opposition to climate change policy and climate action, that then we get this backlash that then prevents us from doing the things that we desperately need to do. So that work's really important, but you can't put a number on it. So I'm very interested in how we measure this in different ways, collecting stories from people, keeping track of conversations, looking at kind of longitudinal work on how it's led to change in people's lives, their confidence, their skills, their social capital, all these kind of things. So I'm very interested in, how we widen the scope to try and measure all these other things that the arts and culture sector can be doing on climate change beyond the numbers. And the numbers are important, but they're not the only thing. And just to reiterate, it's all about our own learning and how we make ourselves do it better. That's what's got to come first. And then the reporting and the accountability come afterwards.
Thank you very much for this reflection. I think this also was, and I must say, although I was earlier complaining, this tool has specifically also pushed us as an organization to have these moments to start talking about what are indeed those non-numerical points that we need to work on. You've mentioned about these socially engaged arts. I know that you're also a fellow in the Alliance for Socially Engaged Arts, and you mentioned that you are part of many projects and initiatives about this, and that there are many examples. Can you entertain us with perhaps an example off the top of your head, if you have, or otherwise it's okay, but if you have any, just so for us to understand, have a grasp on what that may mean in this context, actually.
Yeah, so I'm currently running a project called Sea Change, which is working with 2 coastal towns in Scotland. So Montrose and Buckie are the names of the towns. They're both places that are really affected by climate change in different ways. So Montrose is really at risk from coastal flooding and erosion. Buckie is really at risk because of basically job losses associated with the move out of the fossil fuel industry and into alternatives. They're both places which really need a plan for their future. And that involves needing a vision for where we're going to get to, and also the steps to get us there. So what we're doing is we've embedded an artist in each town. They're running activities, events, creative work of various kinds, which is about trying to understand and capture the perspectives of all the many different stakeholders about what needs to happen in those places, but doing that through a creative way. So trying to make it fun, accessible, trying to reach people who wouldn't engage with that process afterwards. And I think the creative method also helps with trying to avoid it becoming too confrontational when dealing with controversial issues, and also trying to make it less hierarchical, so dealing with the power imbalances in those places. So those workshops, those activities become a way for people to come together, plan collectively, develop a vision for the future of their town, which is presented in a creative way. And then that ultimately does inform planning and policy making. So I'm very interested in how creative work and the process of making creative work together can really actively inform very practical action on climate change. So we're working with those communities and then producing the creative work with them, and then using that to speak to people who are in decision-making roles. So we're working with the Scottish Government. We're also working with Nature Scot, which is kind of the big nature and climate change agency in Scotland, and looking at how the things that we learn from this project and the ideas that come up can inform their plans, which are working across the whole of Scotland. So yeah, it looks something like that. I think the interesting thing about these projects is it's not really about producing a very big, impressive creative output like a big mural or a sculpture or something like that. It's really about the process and doing very simple creative activities with people as a way to kind of build understanding, bring people together for collective action, improve social capital and confidence so that people living in those places actually feel like they're able to kind of take a role in making decisions about their area. And often people feel quite disenfranchised or they don't know how to access that process. So I'm very interested in, how participating in cultural activity improves social capital and confidence in these things that are needed for people to take an active role in that planning process. So it looks something like that.
Yeah, and break those power imbalances as you were mentioning, I suppose. Thank you so much, Luis. Mindful of the time, I would like to ask our participants or anyone who would maybe want to address some questions to our contributors here today. Maybe you have better questions than mine, I hope. Thank you so much, Luis. Please raise hands if you would like to react any of the inputs that we've heard here today, or if you wanted to find out more about the works that are being done or share a reflection. It's very welcome. Okay, a few months ago we had a sustainability webinar with Rocio, and she said that she was not afraid of silence, and that has been my motto since then. I'm not afraid of silence. But in case there are no questions from the audience.
Maybe, I mean, if I have a ton, and probably Maya was jumping in. There you go. I'll leave it to Marie. Thank you, dear.
Sorry, also, I really don't want to interrupt you. No, I was just wondering because, like, after hearing from Luis, this really wonderful project, this sea change project, I was just wondering if Solweig has like similar projects running that she would like to share, because I feel like she's coming from a very artistic perspective and she can maybe share some hands-on projects.
So at the level of ARVIVA, we don't have, as we don't, the project we are taking at the moment are, we are very more recent than Creative Carbon Scotland or Climate Change Scotland. I know the name changed recently, sorry. But there are many things. We know that a lot of type of green project like that have been founded in France by some kind of founding that is called Résidence Verte, that is organized by the French Ministry of Culture, that have started this year. And we can't say what are the projects that have been founding, but this kind of thing. And unfortunately, I don't really have anything to say very important about this matter, sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much, though. I thought I'd give it a
Thank you
shot.
very much, Marie. Sylvia, and please introduce yourselves also. I'm adding you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Rebecca and that's Sylvia. We're sitting in Portugal. Just one question to Lewis, because I was wondering, you mentioned the longitudinal analysis of more socially engaged art projects and more of a qualitative than a quantitative aspect. And I would be really curious to hear whether, and if so, how you did that with this project you just presented, because that would be really interesting to hear, and what your experiences with the methodologies you used were, and what kind of results you got, or what kind of challenges you had. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is challenging and we're still learning. I don't think we found the perfect solution. But one method that we've been using on a project that's sort of just wrapping up, it's got a few months left to go, which we found really useful, is called storytelling evaluation. Which was developed by an arts organization in England they're called the Old Fire Station, and they developed this method, which is a bit similar to if you've ever used most significant change evaluation, where it's kind of about getting people to share in their own words what they think the change was for them. So you're not guessing in advance what the kind of thing that they might say, but really getting people to volunteer what the significance was for them, which isn't necessarily what you would expect. And I think what's nice about this method is basically you're having conversations with them, you're getting them to tell the story of what the project did for them. So you might speak to people who were actively involved in running the project. You might speak to participants and try and get a range of different perspectives and just basically have a chat. You ask a few prompts, but really trying to keep it very simple so you're not leading them too much. Recording the conversation you have and then trying to sort of simplify it and make it into a story. So still using their own words, but just kind of shortening it down into something that is kind of easier for someone to read and understand. And then that becomes your sort of qualitative data that you're using for your evaluation. So those stories of what the project has meant for people. We found that quite powerful in terms of people reading it and really understanding what something is about in a way that the numbers don't do so much. It's quite time intensive. You need to put aside a bit more time to do it. But so far, I think we found that the time is worthwhile. You get a lot out of it. So yeah, that's one method I'd recommend.
Solveig.
Yeah. I had a question for Lewis about this method, because this is something we try to do and we advocate for a lot. And I didn't know this example, but I was wondering, as I really believe it works, but does it come in more of a habitual, normal evaluation that we have to do, showing a budget and on the indicators that we have to reply on when we receive money? Or, I mean, I feel that there are many things that are creating another way of evaluating or doing things, but usually they don't replace the old way of doing. So I was wondering if this one has success to do that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose, yeah, that there does inevitably tend to be that requirement from funders to say, we've run as many events as we said we were going to do, or we reached as many people. And I think that's hard to get away from. And I think we have found that, on the projects I'm running, we basically do just spend a bit more time on evaluation than we used to. But I think it's worthwhile. But I think the reason evaluation often feels annoying and time consuming is because it doesn't feel that useful. But actually, if we're putting in more time to do things that do feel impactful and do help us really understand if things are working better, then it's time really well spent. So I do advocate for actually just spending more time on evaluation if possible, because you do get a lot out of it. And maybe the other thing I'd say is, well, maybe two things. One, I'm really trying to not set aside time to do things that aren't useful. So I think sometimes we get too obsessed with tracking numbers and trying to keep track of so many things. And sometimes those numbers actually aren't useful and relevant. So just really trying to consider, like, is it worth putting in the time to do this? Is this going to tell us something helpful? Like, I used to do kind of surveys of getting people to say, like, how do you feel about action on climate change now? And then kind of resurveying them in 6 months. And I don't think we got very good data by doing that. I don't think it really told us anything that informative. So things like that I'm sort of trying not to do anymore. And then I think the other thing is about trying to have dialogue with funders. So I do think funders are getting more receptive to thinking about different ways of evaluation. And I'm now trying to kind of, in applications and things, saying, this is the approach for evaluation that we want to use. And this is why we think it's good. And this is the evidence to back it up. So that there's hopefully then some kind of agreement in advance about the kind of thing that we should be doing. So there's not an expectation that we should be doing something else. There's maybe a risk associated with that if the funder doesn't like your approach to evaluation. It doesn't necessarily work, but I think it does maybe help in terms of just trying to set the right tone. And I think we do need to speak up for ourselves and not necessarily just say, oh, you're the funder, so what you say must be right. So actually kind of saying to people, I don't think that is useful. And actually funders, I think, are receptive to that because they want the evaluation to be useful. And I think they do find the feedback helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Luis, Solveig, Jordi, and Jorge. It has been very insightful. As all of us can hear, there are various threads, and it feels like a daunting task to bring all of these conversations together. You know, we have the power dynamics, we have regenerative policies, we have a lot to discuss, you know, and I think that it's a good moment perhaps to step back on this brainstorming and go over harvesting what has already been said. So I will let over the word to my colleague Maya, who will help us guide us through this harvesting. Open the discussion for us. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. And thank you for our speakers for being here because, I mean, I don't know about you, but it is really special to be able to have a conversation that is bringing so many different perspectives in. And I don't know how many midday Zoom meetings that you guys are attending these days, but this one has been more exciting than most for me. So I really appreciate you for bringing your voices into the space. Now, I have taken some notes, but as you know, we're going right into harvesting. So, okay, if I've missed something or I'm misquoting or in some way, just keep me honest. But I wanted to find a way to kind of encapsulate what our conversation has been about, where there's some connection points, and then take us into how we can jump into action and what a community of practice can start to look like. So I think some reoccurring themes or some alignments that I heard is that we need to redefine purpose and impact, that there's a need to redefine not only what we are doing, but why we are doing it. I also heard that, of course, climate action requires deeper, more systemic thinking. I mean, this is something that we know, that we need to rethink ecosystems. I think Jorge said this. More than human culture is important to the conversation. Jordi was mentioning, of course, that structural political barriers continue to persist, regardless of some of the initiatives that we put into place as a cultural sector. And of course, this also talks about carbon reduction tools, which are not enough, and we need to think beyond this. What else do I have here? Cultural organizations hold responsibility and unique power. So we heard when Jorge was speaking that small local action matters. There needs to be more space to acknowledge this. Solveig was talking about how cultural institutions and organizations need to consider their role in these resource conflicts of the local and sometimes of the national. And yes, we were also talking about how cultural organizations, and Louis brought this up, how cultural organizations shape social imagination and behavior change, and how that's an incredible value of the sector that we have been harnessing but can continue to harness in this work. And some other connection points are that we need new ways of talking, thinking, and imagining. So I think something Jorge said that stuck with me is that we need to reclaim these ecological words. When we say ecosystem, to really reclaim that for this work and not let them be taken up into other processes or be instrumentalized, as Jordi was speaking of. This also speaks, I think, to Rocio's point that was in the chat about regenerating imagination in our vocabulary. And this is something, I mean, one of our actions that I think will be very much implemented into the community of practice is what that vocabulary looks like and how do we build that together. What else here? So yes, messy notes, but hopefully this is making some kind of flow. We had some challenges that I noted, but of course, if I've mischaracterized anything you've said, you can let me know. This is something we hear a lot in this work. Metrics don't capture cultural value or influence. So again, we can look at the graph, as Lewis was talking about, and see the line going down, but this doesn't really tell the full story of what's happening, especially in the work we do in the cultural sector. Another challenge is working within incomplete or clear climate frameworks. So there might be frameworks that exist, like Solveig was speaking about the Paris Agreement, but it does not necessarily translate into what our responsibilities or our goals should be. And this is something that we can also decide to work towards. And we are, actually, if you hear from the speakers today. And then, of course, more challenges in structural and political barriers. There's obviously a political resistance that's occurring at the moment. And this is also a space in which we often are negotiating our value and our worth. So it's an ongoing challenge for the cultural sector. I think this is more or less, now I'm just looking at scribbles and things like this, but I mean, if there are any other things that people heard that stuck out to them, I mean, feel free to pop in and say something. But I think the most helpful thing would be to lead us into our next conversation. So maybe something that I can ask is more about our next steps. So given everything we've heard, this need for new language, deeper collaboration, clearer purpose, more ambitious forms of cultural action, how do you want to participate, and hopefully you do, in this emerging community of practice? What could be useful for you, and what is something that might be missing in the circles that you're already occupying that could be brought into the community of practice space? That's the wider question. Maybe I start actually with asking who has been in a community of practice and what worked for you, what didn't. I personally have not, so it's also kind of leading a charge that is new for me as well. Rocio.
I mean, I can go and hopefully other people will get, maybe to think about whether they have, or maybe a community of practice, they were in a community, or, maybe it was called something else. But I mean, I personally have been in 2 formal community of practices, and one of them worked very well and one of them was a failure. So, and I think, there's a lot, to learn in these attempts. The first one, the one that worked, relied a lot on a sense of direction, like what is it that is gathering us together? It's not even a mission, it's not even a clear, clear-cut plan or anything like that to start with. But the idea of a clear sense of the direction of something that was missing, in a context that was missing, then there was a huge variety of stakeholders. And I think that we always, there was like an etiquette, like a protocol that always, I mean, we always try to avoid, acronyms, to avoid, hard concepts that we may use in our field, but we try and be as, approachable and as accessible as possible. And then we also actually, what we did is that we had working groups. It wasn't even called like that. It was like, we call them, it was more organic sort of thing. And it worked very well. It was around areas of work on care. And it really worked very, very well. And then we also did something that was to redefine constantly, I mean, not every meeting or not every, but we never met in the same place or following the same format. So there was a lot of creativity there, also. There was no fear of proposing either, as long as it was, within those norms of etiquette and respect, of course. And then the other thing was, as I said, so it was almost like, okay, so let's do a short-term action plan, very short-term. And then we have gotten there. It was enriching. It was worthwhile. Check, okay, what do we go up for next? So it was really like short little moments of celebrating, yay, we got what we wanted to do. So I think that's important to share. And I think, and that was called a community of practice and followed the methodology of a community of practice.
Thanks, Rocío. I think also it probably would be helpful to know what we've already established. I mean, we wanted a space that could be open, but was already a digital space that's already being used by people to also make it more accessible. I mean, I think this is also something that we talked about when beginning what a community of practice could look like, is that the way that people access it, there needs to be a culture of accessibility and openness. So we have already established a LinkedIn group. Maybe some of you have already put requests. I haven't formally accepted the requests yet, as today is the launch. And what we plan over the course of the next few years is to, like Rocío was saying, build upon what the group decides is necessary. So we're having this launch today, and of course we want people to join this group we've made on LinkedIn, but it could mean that eventually we start establishing meeting times. I mean, based on what people are saying works for them, and if this is the best way to share information, we meet. We can meet in different ways. We can find ways to also meet in person if that's possible as well. It can also be a space that we say, actually, what I'm missing in my work is resources. I am looking for evaluation resources and I don't know how to find it. Oh, luckily, I actually just met Lewis today and I can ask him about his resources and evaluation. And we can use the space to share actively what we're working on, and I mean, down to also very micro levels, the things that are supporting the work that we're doing. And of course, it can always be a place where we're asking questions and using it. It doesn't have to be something that just Culture Action Europe or just the MCNO project decides to host an event and we invite you to it. This is also a space that we want to be very community filled. And if there are different offshoots that come from, maybe there's a group of researchers that have very specific focus and questions and ideas and things that they're working on, we can find ways to facilitate this. So I just wanted to let you know that, of course, we're very much in the beginning phases, and the idea is more to have a starting point that doesn't just come from what we think a good community of practice would be or what we think the first steps would be. We want to understand what interest is there and how we can start to facilitate around that. So that is why I asked the question today around what types of things would be useful for you. I mean, for me personally, having a space like this where we can hear from different voices, I mean, not just in our sector, but maybe outside of our sector as well, and having a short conversation to kind of understand the scope of what's happening, that's very useful for me. But maybe for you, it's something else. So I'm just opening the floor to hear some of what might be helpful. If you're in other groups, what do those groups look like? And what are you working on? So that's the question to you all. I see Paula.
Hi. It's Ashton here. Hello, thanks a lot for this webinar, for this shared lunchtime together. So we are from AC, and Kara mentioned Shift. We are working with you guys from Cultural Europe and from NCAT. We are in the same peer group together. And it was really transformative experience for AC joining Shift, and it was really, as Kerem said, like kind of impetus for many, many changes. But coming back to your question, Maya, this is actually I'm asking myself as we are creating within AC a network for sustainability green officers in our member institutions, and this is really something that I ask them and myself. What would be the most beneficial, most like inspiring to do? And what I have noticed people in our sector, higher music education sector, do it's what they need more is sharing of concrete examples of good practices, something very practical, because we hear all our already sharing the same, mindset, the same, let's say we are on the same page, all of us, but we need more something practical that we could implement in our networks or in our organization. And then what I think that people need also a little bit of more research-oriented but very digestible information to also pass it on and also to explain others and convince others to join. And something that I noticed in the last time that, in November, we had a climate salon at our Congress, and the elephant in the room was everything digital and AI versus used in culture and the impact in our lives, the impact on our, let's say, carbon budget. This is something new, maybe not very well still like researched, but it develops so fast, and sometimes we don't have the answers to give to our members and to explain it very, very well for them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's great to hear about the initiative to build the, what did you call it? Green Ambassadors Network, Green.
Yeah, network of officers, green officers. Yeah.
No, great to know. Yeah, I think it's also going off the point that Lewis brought up about sharing the message and how we bring visibility and translate in some ways, or what we call decode what's happening at a very big level, and make it so that people can be actionable and have accessible tools that are open to use. So it's notes taken about I have research grounded but digestible and accessible information. I think this is also something that can be a topic, because I do hear a lot about needing practical tools in our work, but as I think also Kerem was saying earlier, there's so much knowledge that's floating around and also in between misinformation as well in our news, that it does make it quite a task, if you're not already immersed in this area, to find what is necessary for your work and what is trusted and what really fits with the particularities of our sector as well. So that's definitely noted. Thank you. We also will be, when we open the community of practice space on LinkedIn, I will have an introduction question that we hope all of you join and just introduce yourselves to each other, but there will also be a space to really reflect and think about what's needed based on what we talked about today, based on when you go back to the other things, that millions of other things you're doing, how actually it might be helpful to reach out to others across and beyond the sector. So I will also, you enter the space, you'll see a prompt and you'll be able to introduce yourselves that way. And I think that will also be a nice way to continue this conversation, is to have some time to reflect. Of course, we need that space too. So if there's no other immediate thoughts, I won't hold anyone here longer than they need to be. So maybe I can pass it back to Rocio.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Kerem, and thank you to all of you. Before leaving, actually, there are a couple of things that I did want to, bring back. One has to do with some of the radical thinking that I think some of these actions and some of these strategies are actually aiming at. We have to think outside the walked path, and we also have to think critically. So I think that also having a space where we can actually share these. I mean, what Solweig just shared. I'm very much aware of other places. I mean, I think that we're in a field of dispute, and this is what it is all also coming down to. And I think that we have to be aware that that before this comes or this becomes a battle for resources, where the most powerful gets the resources needed to continue living the way that we live, we have to find a way in which we act as communities. And really, I'm retaining also a sentence that Jorge said, and he said that some days you feel closer to hope. And I have to tell you, I mean, a day like this and with a meeting like this, I am feeling closer to hope. So let's hope, let's really work for to give this space, which again, it's really in its nascent, moments. We don't know what's going to come out of this, but we know that we need it. So please, let's, and if there's something that you are not feeling, this is not the channel, this is not the tone, this is not the way, let's be outspoken about this, because really, we need this, and that is something that we have been receiving. We need something like that. Okay, so let's just give it a try. If it needs to look something different, if it needs to feel differently, we'll do it. But we need to do it together. And I think that it's very important that we walk out of here today with this idea. Please talk about this new space status or mood that we're trying to create to your colleagues, your friends, the people with whom you share your projects, because this is really where we would love to meet. The link is going to be in the chat very soon. This session has been recorded and it will be published together with some notes that we have been taking. And we really count on you. We count on you for what is coming. And as Maya said, when you join the community of practice, you will be able to share a little bit about what you're doing, what brought you here, and what you expect to get out with. Anyway, thank you. Thank you so much. And we were thinking how to end. And this is how we're going to end. Who made the world?
Who made the swan and the black bear?
Who made the grasshopper?
This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar out of my hand. Who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes.
Now she lifts her pale form and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down into the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day.
Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day. Thanks to Marie Oliver for this poem, and hope to see you very, very, very soon.